Jewish people thought you couldn't do any work on the Sabbath, and Jesus explains that there is a spirit behind the law. The Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So they thought it's the other way around. The Sabbath is holy, and people have to fit themselves to make sure they keep the Sabbath holy. But Jesus was explaining that no, the human being is the recipient of these mercies from God, and if you need to somehow modify your practice of the Sabbath to make sure you look after human interest, then this is what should be done. In a similar way, in Islam, we understand that some of the laws have been abrogated.
Can we just take the example of the institution of marriage to explain this?
Institution of marriage. And what specifically
marriage
about?
And divorce. The laws concerning divorce.
Yeah, there are some aspects of the law which has been abrogated over time. For example, in the Old Testament, it is understood that one can give a certificate of divorce, but in the New Testament, it is understood that divorce is a bad thing. You cannot divorce and remarry. Jesus is reported to have said that, again, that law was given due to your deviations, but now we go back to what he says is the original, that you should not divorce at all, because what God has joined, you should not, no man should set asunder. And then in the Islamic faith, we understand that divorce is permissible. It's not a good thing, but of all the undesirable things, of all of the bad things, this one here is not so bad. It's undesirable, but it can be tolerated because the other choice would not lead to goodness in the society. You have the idea of levirate marriage, where a woman, according to the Old Testament, a woman not bearing a son for her husband, who now dies, is passed on to the husband's brother, so that he can father a child through her for her brother, for his brother. And then that can go on for many generations until she actually fathers a child. So that's called levirate marriage, and it seems to be confirmed in the New Testament that this could happen, in fact. But in the Islamic tradition, it does not seem that that's possible. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes?
Since we're looking at the Hebrew scripture, the Greek binoculars.
Sorry, I can't hear you because of how noisy.
Since we're looking at Hebrew scripture through the Greek binoculars, because Luke spoke Greek, he translated it to Greek and then from Greek to other languages. In Semitic languages, the word "we" is a word of respect. Do you think where the Christianity appears, they have translated the word "we" as a trinity? Because God refers to himself as "we" created in the Quran and in Judaism.
No, I don't think it has anything to do with this. It has to do with a development over time where people continue to think of Jesus as being greater than he was thought to be before. One of the issues is that, as William Barclay in his Daily Bible Commentary points out, when Christianity came to be preached outside of Jewish circles, there was a real challenge for Christians to show that Jesus is someone special in the eyes of their hearers. If you spoke to the Jews and you said that Jesus is the Messiah, that was a title of significance. They knew what you meant. Well, you could mean more than one thing, but at least they had an idea that it's someone special if he's called Messiah. But when he is preached in the Greco-Roman world, if anyone was special in the Greco-Roman world, he was the Son of God. So Christians, to make their message relevant to the Greco-Roman world and to let people understand that Jesus was someone special, chose this title for Jesus, Son of God, because that was already an Old Testament title for men who were in God's favor. So why not Jesus? So Son of God was a natural title for them to use. They obviously meant it metaphorically, but their hearers thought that this was meant literally. And eventually, Christianity became Roman. It became Gentile Christianity, and eventually Roman Catholicism, until, of course, eventually the Protestant movement broke away from it, and so too the Anglican Church. But for many centuries, we can see the development in that direction. It went outside of Jewish circles. The synagogues became closed to Christians, and Christianity became divorced from its Jewish roots and took on a life of its own. it became Gentile Christianity as opposed to Jewish Christianity. So Gentiles with their ideas about gods and goddesses and gods coming in the world in terms of flesh, they're being sons of God, literally so, and so on. All of these had an influence in the shaping of later Christian thought. So when we see it happening that way, we can understand this development towards proclaiming Jesus as being God himself. And once Jesus was proclaimed God himself in the Council of Nicaea, there was a question about the Holy Spirit, because as one of our questioners pointed out earlier on, in the Bible, sometimes there is some ambiguity about the Spirit of God. Is the Spirit of God God himself? Or is that some sort of a power which comes out of God, or is linked to God, but some sort of power that somehow is an independent identity that seems to do things? Now, naturally, one who reads the Bible with the attitude of making sense of it all and not finding opposite things in the Bible, making everything mean the same thing, will say that, okay, there is only one God, and somehow the Spirit of God, though there is an expression about the Spirit of God apparently being a separate identity, is nevertheless the same God, because there is only one God. But once the Council of Nicaea had declared Jesus to be God, the simple one had already been broken into two. It's already been split. Now there's one God, but not only God the Father, but also God the Son. So if you can have that, God the Father and God the Son, and still only have one God, well, why don't we do something about the Trinity as well? And that led to the Council of Constantinople in the year 381 to decide about the Holy Spirit. What are we going to say about the Holy Spirit? So even at the Council of Nicaea, the doctrine of the Trinity was not fully worked out. It'll be fully worked out through subsequent councils in Constantinople, then Ephesus in 431, and then finally Chalcedon in the year 450 or 51. Council. That gives us the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed that's finally hammered out at Chalcedon. So it's a long series of developments.
Okay, can I just say one thing?
Yes.
Going back to the Mark, Matthew, Luke, you said in Luke, it says, "You have said that I am." Actually, if you look at in Luke 23, it says, "If you are the Christ," they said, "Tell us." Jesus answered, "If I tell you," they asked, "Are you the Son of God?" He replied, "You are right in saying that I am."
Okay, that's the translation you're using, and they've interpreted these words as "you have said that I am." That's the literal wording. But this translation you're reading interprets these words as meaning that Jesus is confirming that, you have said it and you're right. It's like, you just said it. So you're right, in a way.
You interpret that to mean, or what have everybody's interpreted?
This here is close to the literal wording.
Okay.
You have said it. But the translation you're reading is an interpretation of this statement to bring it along the lines of this.
Okay.
Here, it's unequivocal that he confirmed, "I am." So the translators are looking at the two. That seems to be different from that. And they're saying that this statement, though it appears to be different from that, really means something like that. So when Jesus said, "You have said it," he means what you have said is the truth, but it came from your mouth rather than mine.
Okay. And also in Matthew, okay, you can probably come back on this. But,
what translation are you reading?
The NIV, New International Version.
Okay.
Okay. Just in Matthew 26, they ask, "Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." "Yes, it is as you say," Jesus replied.
Okay. So you've confirmed my doubt. When I mentioned Matthew, I couldn't remember clearly enough whether Matthew was similar to Mark or whether it has the different wording.
That's
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, still on this topic of Matthew, Mark and Luke, though, doesn't that really destroy your theory? You say your theory is that Mark predates everything else,
yes,
and has the lower Christology, and then you go up through the Gospels, therefore then you expect to see higher Christology. But the problem is, it's contradicted by the evidence. You actually have Luke giving the weaker statement than Mark, so that kind of ruins your whole theory that Mark is the least Christological, the one that gives the least high value to Jesus. That kind of ruins your whole theory because the evidence is against you.
Not really. Let me explain that a little bit further. You will recall that I said that scholars say that